Hello, my name is Vasilios Kuzmakos, and this is my final presentation on Cuba. I fell in love with this country's dynamic history and cultural variety, and really hope you guys can learn as much about this fascinating country as I did. First, I want to do an overview. In this presentation, I'm going to discuss some general information, health and education in Cuba, its legacy of American imperialism, social roles, and finally, I'm just going to give a brief synthesis of what I got from this beautiful country. General information. Cuba is located in the Caribbean Sea, south of the Bahamas, west of Haiti, and north of Jamaica. Its current government is communist, with the current head of state being Raul Castro, who succeeded his brother Fidel Castro in 2017. Its currency is the peso, and the official language is Spanish. To give a brief rundown on Cuban history, Columbus first arrived in 1492, where he encountered a significant Taino Indian population. He quickly decimated its population through the introduction of disease and the introduction of the encomienda system, which was a working class system akin to slavery. This directly resulted in the introduction and the exportation of tens of thousands of African slaves in order to work the sugar plantations that would come to dominate the island. Spanish rule lasted approximately 300 years, with two failed rebellions happening during this time period. The Spanish would only relinquish their control during the Spanish-American War, when Americans would beat them and would have Cuba under guise of a protectorate. Unfortunately, however, Cubans only found that they traded one master for another. American intervention increased the wealth gap significantly under the Batista regime, which directly resulted in the modern Cuban Revolution under the leadership of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. Cuba would become communist during this time period and would come to dominate Latin American politics for the 20th century. Currently, Cuba is facing economic isolation, which is currently dethaling as the Western powers are slowly reaching back in order to have them back in the international community. First off, I would simply like to talk about healthcare in Cuba. Cuba has always held one of the best healthcare systems in Latin America. And even in the 1950s, Cuba had more doctors per patient than France and Great Britain. This healthcare system, however, was marked by profound inequalities in access and quality due to the concentration of doctors in urban areas. The leaders of the revolution, therefore, saw healthcare as a basic right and believed everybody should have it. In order to do this, in order to decrease the gap between urban and rural communities, they implemented a revolutionary program known as the Servicio Medical Rural, which sent hundreds of doctors from urban areas to the country. Cuba nationalized their healthcare services, going so far as to enshrine healthcare as a basic right in the Constitution. They established a variety of polyclinics throughout the country, which even decreased the health gap even further. Cuba's doctor quality has always been world renowned, and even today, Cuban doctors are seen as some of the best in the world. The healthcare system in Cuba has always had an emphasis on prevention, which is why Cuba has universal vaccinations. This helped to completely eradicate a variety of diseases such as polio, tetanus, and rubella in Cuba. Cuba is a Cuba is a case study. Cuba serves as a perfect case study to show how even under the weight of global economic isolation, universal and more importantly quality healthcare is definitely possible. Education. Cuba has one of the highest literacy rates in the entire world at around 99%. Education in Cuba is subsidized at all levels, from primary school to university, but is mandatory until ninth grade. The vast majority of Cuban citizens, however, do end up going to college with a dropout rate of around 1%. Cuba invests heavily in its educational infrastructure, investing over 7% of its total GDP. Education is seen as one of the cornerstones of the revolution because Cuban leaders believe that for the country to be strong, it must have a population capable of participating and engaging in civic thought. American imperialism. Cuba has one of the richest legacies of imperialism in Latin America, with its roots going back all the way back to Columbus's discovery of the island in 1492. Americans superseded the Spanish as a predominant imperialist power on the island through their intervention in the Spanish-American War. At first, American troops were seen as saviors. Were seen as saviors, and the critical component needed to deal with the final death blow to the Spanish crown. These aspirations of hope quickly became dread, however, as Cubans realized that they had only traded one master for another. Within a week of their independence, the Cuban people saw the dissolution of their army and their rights to expression censored. Furthermore, the new nation saw its foreign and domestic affairs tied inextricably with that of the United States through the Declaration of the Platt Amendment. Under the Platt Amendment, the United States had complete social, economic, and political control over Cuba. This was further exacerbated under the Batista regime. Under the Batista regime, the United States had complete control of the United States economy and instated the dollar as a currency of exchange. This led to the rapid devaluing of the Cuban currency and caused a sharp decline in proprietorship, in which countless farmers lost their land. The American business lobby also began to hold a predominant role in the Cuban economy. They used their influence to promote the profits of American companies which came to dominate the island. The problem became so endemic, in fact, that at its height, American interests controlled over 50% of Cuban sugar production, 90% of its mines, and 80% of its railways. The monopolization of the Cuban industry created a severe wealth gap, where over a third of the public lived in poverty. During the Cold War, the American imperialism was continuing to rear its head, even under the Castro regime. The U.S. imposed extremely heavy economic sanctions during the Cold War, which led to extremely um, harsh shortages in essential materials such as oil. The United States government attempted to kill Castro several hundred times, with methods being as diverse as putting explosives in his cigars. They also attempted to fail coup through the Bay of Pigs invasion. Today, Cuba still experiences American imperialism through the severe economic sanctions, which keeps it from entering the global economy. This prevents it from accessing um this prevents it from accessing modern goods such as electronics and cars, and is still one of the main reasons that Cuba is still in a state of destitution rather than promising economic and political standpoint it should be. Social roles. Racism and sexism has long dominated Cuban culture, going back to its legacy in colonial times. Racism prior to the revolution was rampant in Cuban society. A legacy of colonialism, Because of legacy of colonialism, Afro-Cubans endured segregation and discrimination under the guise of eugenic policies and at the hands of groups such as the Ku Klux Klan Cubano. Acknowledging the prevalence of racism and seeing it as a counter-revolutionary idea, Castro instituted um, reforms to eliminate racial disparities in education, employment, and political spaces. These reforms had a positive and measurable impact on the lives of Afro-Cubans. The number of Afro-Cubans that held political office rose from 13% in 1976 to 26% in 2003. The gap in education was also reduced. By 1981, the literacy rate for Afro-Cubans and mulattoes actually exceeded that of their white counterparts. Castro, um, Castro failed, however, to address the cultural root of the problem. He allowed racism to persist, albeit in a more closeted form. Afro-Cubans today still experience discrimination and racism as part of their daily lives. Sexism in Cuba was believed to have disappeared after the Cuban Revolution. the predominance of machismo culture in Cuban society disputes this. In Cuban society, women are expected to stay at home and cook, while men are expected to work and go out with their friends. The majority of the majority of political power is held by men, with only 7% of women being represented in the communist government. Women in Cuba, though, still feel good by themselves due to the fallacy the due to the fallacy the sex system was abolished after the revolution. This is because women were seen as daughters of the revolution, and the casual and and revolution and revolutionary propaganda portray them as equals of men. According to a 2012 report on the gender gap, however, Cuba ranked 19th out of 135 countries, even surpassing the United States, which was ranked 21st. Therefore, therefore, even if women aren't necessarily equal as their government says it is, they still enjoy at least and they still enjoy some political and social autonomy. Though sexism and racism still pervade Cuban society, the growth is happening and gives hope for future generations. Finally, my synthesis. I believe that Cuba has been unfairly characterized. In the United States, we're led to believe that Cuba is a French communist government with no semblance of human rights. But the matter of the fact is that this simply isn't true. Cuba is not only a product of 400 years of colonial legacies, but also of modern economic isolation. And in fact, we can learn a lot from Cuba. Cuba, dis- despite having Despite having extremely heavy economic sanctions set upon it, it has prospered in healthcare, education, and, and civil rights. Within 50 years, it has completely transformed the country itself from a direct product of imperialist powers to a modern day self-sufficient state. And that is something to be acknowledged. I truly believe that the thawing of U.S.-Cuban relations will directly result in an economic and social boom for the country. Cu- in order for Cuba to go forward, it must reconnect itself within the global political, economic, and social landscape, while still remaining as the fierce, independent, and, pro- and unique country it is. I really hope you enjoyed my presentation on Cuba. This was a fascinating country to do my case studies on, and I really hope you guys learned as much about this fascinating country as I did. Thank you so much.